The siege of Mandalore was coming to an end, but something deeply and inexplicably disturbed Ahsoka Tano. During Maul's capture, she had witnessed strange behavior from a high-ranking clone officer who, for brief seconds, seemed to be fighting against himself after intercepting an encrypted transmission coming directly from Coruscant. The soldier trembled, his eyes lost focus, and he murmured something about orders and absolute obedience, as if he were being reprogrammed in real time. Ahsoka couldn't forget the empty expression on that face, nor the sensation in the Force that something beyond military loyalty was controlling those men. She then remembered the incident with Clone Tup years ago, when he had executed a Jedi without apparent reason and repeated a sinister phrase about an order. At that time, the Jedi Council had investigated superficially, but the official conclusion was that it was an isolated defect in clone conditioning, and the case was filed away without further consequences. But Ahsoka always felt there was more to that story, and now, faced with that officer mentally convulsing, she knew she couldn't simply ignore the signs again. Instead of focusing all her energy only on capturing Maul, Ahsoka made a risky decision that could change the fate of the galaxy. She summoned Captain Rex, the only clone she fully trusted, and explained her suspicions with all the seriousness the situation demanded. Rex initially hesitated, torn between his loyalty to the Republic and the absolute trust he had in Ahsoka, but her expression left no doubt about the gravity of what was being proposed. Together, they sought out Mandalorian medical technology, which was completely independent of Republic systems and, therefore, free from any possible sabotage or external monitoring. Ahsoka knew that if there really was a conspiracy involving the clones, using Republic equipment would be like alerting the conspirators about their investigation. Rex, demonstrating courage that went beyond military duty, volunteered for the deep brain scan, even without knowing what might be found. He lay down on the medical stretcher while Ahsoka adjusted the scanner parameters, her hands trembling slightly as she initiated the procedure that could reveal a terrible truth. The results appeared on the holographic screen with frightening clarity, showing something that shouldn't be there. In the frontal lobe of Rex's brain, clearly visible in the three-dimensional images generated by the scanner, there was an artificial organic mass that was not part of natural clone biology. The structure was complex, with direct neural connections integrated into the decision-making and motor control centers, as if it had been specifically designed to take control at determined moments. Ahsoka felt a chill run down her spine as she magnified the image and analyzed the patterns of neural connection that thing created. Rex looked at the screen with an expression that mixed horror and understanding, finally comprehending why he sometimes felt impulses he couldn't explain, moments when his own will seem distant and confused. Ahsoka cataloged all the technical information she could extract from the scanner, including the device's composition, its precise location, and the neural activation patterns it generated. She knew that this wasn't a manufacturing defect nor a legitimate security measure, but rather a tool of absolute control designed to transform loyal soldiers into programmed assassins. With all the evidence compiled and documented, Ahsoka made the most important decision of her life up to that moment. She wouldn't take that information to the Jedi Council first, where bureaucracy and politics could delay crucial action, nor would she try to solve something of such massive scale alone. There was only one person in the galaxy she completely trusted to understand the gravity of that discovery and act with the necessary speed: Anakin Skywalker. He was her former master, someone who had always trusted her instincts even when they contradicted the rules, and more importantly, someone with enough influence on the Council and proximity to the Chancellor to investigate the origins of that conspiracy. Ahsoka prepared a complete holographic report, including Rex's scans, technical analyses of the chip, and a compilation of all the anomalous incidents she had discovered. She recorded a personal message for Anakin, carefully choosing each word, knowing that the fate of the Jedi Order and perhaps the entire Republic depended on how he would react to that information. Then, with Rex at her side as living witness to that terrible discovery, she sent the encrypted transmission directly to Coruscant, using emergency codes that would ensure only Anakin could access it. On Coruscant, Anakin Skywalker was alone in the Jedi Council chamber, watching the lights of the planet city through the wide windows while his mind churned with worries that seemed to multiply each day. Visions of Padme dying in childbirth tormented his nights, robbing him of sleep and peace, while during the day he was pressured by Palpatine to question the loyalty and methods of the Jedi Council. The Chancellor had planted seeds of doubt in his mind with such skill that Anakin could no longer clearly distinguish between his own legitimate concerns and the manipulative suggestions that were constantly whispered in his ear. He felt trapped between two worlds, between the Jedi Order he had sworn to serve and a man who seemed to offer answers to his most desperate problems. In that moment of extreme vulnerability, when Anakin was closest to making decisions that would change his destiny forever, the holographic communicator on his desk emitted an emergency signal using a code he hadn't seen in a long time. It was Ahsoka's personal code, marked with maximum priority and high-level military encryption. Anakin activated the holographic projection immediately, and Ahsoka's bluish image materialized before him, but something in her expression made him momentarily forget all his own concerns. She didn't have the posture of someone coming to talk about battle tactics or request reinforcements for Mandalore, but rather the urgency of someone who had discovered something that threatened everything they knew. Anakin, I need you to listen to me with maximum attention, because what I'm about to say could completely change our understanding of this entire war. She began, her voice carrying a seriousness he had rarely heard. Don't trust anyone until you verify what I'm about to reveal. We discovered something in the clones, something that was implanted in them from the beginning of their creation on Kamino. She then explained in detail about the organic chip they had found in Rex's brain, showing the medical scans and explaining how the device was connected to the neural centers responsible for decision-making and motor control. It's a control protocol, Anakin. Someone planned this from the beginning of the Clone Wars to destroy us from within, to transform our own allies into assassins at the right moment. But Anakin, already deeply influenced by weeks of constant manipulation by Palpatine, didn't react with the urgency Ahsoka expected. Instead, an expression of skepticism began to form on his face, mixed with the paranoia that had been carefully cultivated by the Chancellor. Ahsoka, the Chancellor told me there are plots on all sides of this war, including within the Jedi Council itself, he responded, his voice carrying a defensiveness that wasn't there before. Maybe these chips are actually a necessary security measure against Jedi who may have been corrupted or who represent a real threat. You've been away from Coruscant for too long. You don't know what we've discovered about betrayal at the highest levels of the Order. He paced in circles as he spoke, his body language reflecting the mental confusion that dominated him. You might be being paranoid, seeing conspiracies where there are only reasonable security precautions. But Ahsoka Tano was not someone who gave up easily, especially when it came to Anakin. She interrupted the holographic transmission and made an instant decision that demonstrated the desperate urgency of the situation. She would immediately embark for Coruscant, leaving Mandalore in Rex's hands. This was not a conversation that could be resolved through holograms. She needed to look into Anakin's eyes, use their connection through the Force, and show him the physical evidence they had collected. Hours later, when her ship landed in one of the private hangars of the Jedi Temple, she went directly to meet Anakin, without even stopping to make a formal report of her mission on Mandalore. She found him exactly where she expected, in the now empty council chamber, still lost in his turbulent thoughts. The conversation that followed was intense and emotional, with Ahsoka showing not just the technical data, but appealing to the bond they shared, reminding him of who he really was beneath all the confusion and manipulation. Anakin, you taught me to trust the Force and to question when something doesn't seem right. I'm asking you to do the same now. Look at this evidence. Feel through the Force if I'm lying or being manipulated. Seeing that Anakin was still divided, Ahsoka made another crucial decision that would prove to be the turning point of the entire situation. We need another opinion, from someone you respect and who can see this clearly, she said. Anakin, call Obi-Wan. He knows you better than any other Jedi, knows when you're being influenced, and has the experience to evaluate this evidence with the necessary objectivity. Anakin hesitated, part of him fearing his former master's judgment, but the deepest part of his being, the one that was still the Jedi he had sworn to be, knew Ahsoka was right. He sent an urgent message to Obi-Wan, requesting a private meeting in the temple hangars before any meeting with the full council. When Obi-Wan arrived, he found not just Anakin, but also Ahsoka, and the expression on both their faces immediately told him that something extraordinarily serious was happening. Ahsoka presented all the evidence again, this time with Rex present through hologram to personally testify about the chip in his own brain. Obi-Wan examined the data with the meticulousness characteristic of an experienced Jedi Master, asking technical questions, verifying the authenticity of the scans, and considering the strategic implications of what was being revealed. Obi-Wan's reaction was immediate and unequivocal, demonstrating the wisdom that had made him one of the most respected Jedi in the Order. "This is real, Anakin, and it's much worse than any conspiracy we could have imagined," he said, his deep voice carrying the weight of someone who had just understood the true nature of the trap they had fallen into. "If these chips exist in all the clones, and if they can be remotely activated, then the entire Jedi Order is living in a minefield about to explode. It doesn't matter who planted this or why. The fact is that our most trusted military force can be turned against us at any moment." He looked directly at Anakin with an intensity that cut through all layers of manipulation and doubt. "My old Padawan, I know you have been under great pressure and that there are influences trying to distort your perception of reality. But look at Ahsoka, look at Rex, feel through the Force the truth of what they're saying. This is not paranoia nor political conspiracy. It's physical evidence of a real and immediate threat." Obi-Wan's support was the turning point Anakin needed, the voice of reason and experience that finally managed to penetrate through the fog of confusion that Palpatine had created in his mind. In that crucial moment, among the three Jedi who shared deep bonds of master and apprentice, balance began to restore itself. Anakin felt something inside him realign, as if he were waking from a nightmare and could finally see clearly again. He hid nothing from Obi-Wan and Ahsoka, confessed his fears about Padme, the promises Palpatine had made about power to prevent death, and the constant pressure to distrust the Jedi Council. But now, faced with physical and indisputable proof of the chip, with the support of two people he loved and completely trusted, all of that seemed less important than the real threat before them. The decision was made quickly, without the hesitation that could cost lives and destroy everything they fought to protect. Anakin, Obi-Wan, and Ahsoka knew they couldn't simply take that information to the full Jedi Council without first taking preventive measures that would ensure their own survival and that of other Jedi scattered throughout the galaxy. If there really was someone with the ability to remotely activate those chips, and if that person discovered their conspiracy had been exposed, they could advance the execution and condemn thousands of Jedi to death before any countermeasure could be implemented. The three Jedi needed to act with absolute speed and discretion, creating a safety net before directly confronting whoever was behind that monstrous trap. Anakin and Obi-Wan, using their high-authority command codes as Jedi generals, began sending encrypted messages to the closest and most trusted clone commanders they personally knew. They didn't reveal the true nature of the threat, which could cause panic or disbelief, but instead issued an emergency medical order that seemed legitimate within established military protocols. The messages were carefully worded to sound like a routine health concern, but with enough urgency to ensure immediate compliance. "Commander Cody, this is a priority medical order from General Kenobi," one of the transmissions began. "Reports from Mandalore indicate a possible neurological anomaly in some clones that may be related to enemy communications interference. As a precaution, you must immediately implement an external communications isolation protocol from Coruscant until further notice. Maintain only local channels active and report any anomalous behavior among your troops." Similar messages were sent to Rex, who was already aware of the full situation, to Wolf, Gray, and other commanders who had served directly under Anakin and Obi-Wan over the years. The genius of that strategy lay in its calculated ambiguity. The clone commanders would follow the orders because they came from their Jedi generals through authorized channels, but wouldn't fully understand they were being protected against an activation signal that could transform them into assassins of their own leaders. Communications isolation meant that when the order came, it would be blocked before reaching the inhibitor chips of the clones under the direct command of those specific commanders. It was a desperate and incomplete measure, protecting only a fraction of the clone forces, but it could be enough to prevent an attack on the Jedi Order. The Jedi Council chamber was full when Anakin, Obi-Wan, and Ahsoka entered, carrying not just data on holographic devices, but also Rex live as physical witness. The presence of a clone in the council chamber was already irregular, but the expression on the three Jedi's faces made it clear the situation transcended normal protocols. Master Yoda and Master Windu observed with growing attention as Ahsoka began her presentation, projecting the medical scans in the center of the room where everyone could see clearly. discovered on Mandalore. This was an organic chip implanted in all the clones, Yoda commented, his ancient voice carrying deep sadness as he studied the images. Blind we were. See this threat under our nose we could not. Mace Windu stood up, his rigid posture reflecting the controlled anger of someone who had just realized the magnitude of the betrayal. This is evidence of conspiracy on a galactic scale, he said, his deep voice echoing through the chamber. Whoever planned this had access to the creation programs on Kamino from the beginning, which means involvement at very high levels of the Republic government. Obi-Wan supplemented the analysis with his own observations about the Tup incident years before, how that case had been quickly filed away, and how it was now clear it had been a premature activation of the protocol that someone had worked hard to cover up. The discussion in the council was intense but surprisingly brief, as the evidence was irrefutable and the urgency of the situation didn't allow for the kind of philosophical debate that normally characterized those meetings. Master Ki-Adi-Mundi raised practical concerns about how to verify the presence of chips in the entire clone force without causing panic or alerting the conspirators, while Master Plo Koon, who had a special connection with the clones under his command, expressed both horror and determination to protect those soldiers from being transformed into attack tools against their will. The real question that dominated the discussion was who had the power and motivation to execute a conspiracy of such magnitude. Act we must, and quickly Yoda declared, striking his staff on the floor to emphasize the urgency. To the Senate, take this evidence we must, but prepared for resistance be we must. Influence over Kamino only someone in very high position could have. Mace Windu proposed decisive action. The council should directly confront Chancellor Palpatine, not as an accusation, but as an investigation of a threat to the Republic's security that demanded total transparency from all levels of government. The strategic advantage they had was the knowledge that at least some clone commanders had already been isolated from Coruscant communications, which gave them a small reserve force if the situation escalated to direct confrontation. The Jedi Council then made a decision that was both legally grounded and tactically prepared for resistance. They wouldn't simply go to the Senate making vague accusations of conspiracy, but rather would present physical evidence of biological treason against the Republic and the Jedi Order, demanding a complete and immediate investigation of the clone creation programs and any secret communication that could activate those control devices. Mace Windu wouldn't go alone as on so many other delicate missions. He would be accompanied by Anakin, Obi-Wan, Yoda, and a selected guard that included Rex as living witness to the evidence. The approach would be firm but diplomatic, giving the Chancellor the opportunity to fully cooperate with the investigation or reveal himself as part of the conspiracy through his resistance. It was a dangerous moment that could end in violent confrontation or in exposure of a treason network that went to the highest levels of the galactic government. But now, armed with irrefutable evidence and with at least a fraction of their military forces protected against chip activation, the Jedi finally had a real chance to disarm the trap before it could be detonated. The council session ended with each member knowing that the next few hours would define not just the fate of the Jedi Order, but possibly the future of the entire galaxy. In the Supreme Chancellor's office, Palpatine felt a disturbance in the Force that alerted him that something had gone drastically wrong with his meticulously elaborated plans. For years, he had orchestrated every move of the Clone Wars, positioning his pieces on the galactic board with infinite patience, waiting for the perfect moment to execute Order 66 and destroy the Jedi in one stroke. But now, trying to establish connection with the communication systems that would activate the inhibitor chips simultaneously throughout the entire galaxy, he discovered that his signals were being blocked in key sectors, especially those commanded by the most influential Jedi like Skywalker and Kenobi. The transmissions returned with protocol errors, indicating that the clone commanders had implemented communications isolation by direct order of their Jedi generals. Someone had discovered the chips, and worse still, had acted fast enough to sabotage the protocol's execution before it could be fully activated. Palpatine immediately understood that his window of opportunity was closing rapidly, and that soon the Jedi would come to him with questions he couldn't answer without revealing his true nature. The Sith Lord's rage grew within him like a storm, but he contained it under the mask of a concerned politician, preparing for the confrontation he knew was coming. The door to the Chancellor's office opened with authority, not with the usual deference of visitors requesting an audience, but with the determination of Jedi on official mission. Mace Windu entered first, his presence filling the space with force energy that didn't hide suspicion and preparation for combat. Behind him came Anakin Skywalker and Obi-Wan Kenobi, but the configuration was completely different from the one Palpatine had carefully planned in his manipulations. Anakin wasn't alone and confused, tormented by visions and ready to do anything to save Padme, but rather beside his former master, with an expression of clarity and determination that the Chancellor hadn't seen in weeks. Chancellor Palpatine, Mace Windu began without preambles or diplomatic courtesies. The Jedi Council has discovered evidence of a conspiracy against the Republic and against the Jedi Order that involves mind control devices implanted in the entire clone army. We demand your full cooperation with our investigation and immediate access to all communication records from your office related to Kamino's creation programs. Palpatine maintained his mask of shocked politician for a few more moments, expressing disbelief and concern, but his occasionally yellowed eyes betrayed the ancient rage that seethed beneath the surface. He tried to use his influence over Anakin one last time, appealing to the friendship and trust he had built. Anakin, surely you don't believe these absurd accusations. I have been your ally and counselor, helping you navigate the complexities of this war. But Anakin Skywalker, standing between Obi-Wan and Mace Windu, was no longer the confused and manipulable Jedi that Palpatine had carefully molded over years of insidious influence. He had chosen to believe the evidence that Ahsoka brought from Mandalore, had chosen to trust Obi-Wan's judgment, and more importantly, had reconnected with who he really was beneath all the layers of fear and manipulation. I saw the evidence with my own eyes, Chancellor Anakin responded, his voice firm and without the doubt that previously characterized his interactions with Palpatine. I saw the chip in Rex's brain, read the incident reports that were covered up, and understood how this entire war was a trap from the beginning. His rejection was the moment Palpatine realized his plans had completely failed, that he wouldn't have his chosen apprentice, and that confrontation could no longer be avoided or postponed. The mask of the gentle politician began to fall, revealing glimpses of the true Sith nature he had hidden for decades. Mace Windu felt the change immediately through the Force, and his hand instinctively went to his lightsaber, prepared for the revelation he knew was coming. Chancellor, your refusal to cooperate only confirms your involvement in this conspiracy. In the name of the Galactic Senate and the Republic's security, you are being placed under custody until a full investigation can be conducted. It was then that the final transformation occurred, when Palpatine completely abandoned any pretense of being a legitimate servant of democracy. The Force exploded around him in waves of dark side energy as he revealed himself as Darth Sidious, the Sith Lord who had manipulated the entire galaxy for more than a decade. Sith Force lightning exploded from his hands, filling the office with destructive energy as he attacked the Jedi with fury that had been contained for years of disguise. But unlike the original timeline, where Anakin arrived alone and confused, ready to be converted, now Sidious faced 3 prepared and united Jedi. Mace Windu blocked the lightning with his purple lightsaber, the Vapad technique he mastered allowing him to redirect the dark side energy back against its user. Anakin and Obi-Wan flanked the Sith Lord from both sides, their blue sabers creating a net of light that contained and pressed Sidious from multiple directions. The combat was intense and devastating, destroying ancient furniture and burning the office walls with residual energy from each strike and block. Finally, Mace Windu found the opening he was looking for, his Vapad technique allowing him to use Sidious's own rage against him. With a precise and decisive movement, he disarmed the Sith Lord, the red lightsaber flying across the room and falling inert on the floor. Sidious, wounded and weakened but still dangerous, tried one last attack with Force lightning, but the 3 Jedi blocked the joint attack. "This is the end of the road for you," Sidious, Mace Windu declared. His lightsaber pointed at the fallen Sith Lord who was still trying to gather energy for another attack. "You orchestrated a war that killed billions, tried to destroy the Jedi Order through biological treason, and corrupted the Republic from within. There will be no mercy for someone who represents such a threat to the galaxy's peace." Sidious, knowing he was defeated but refusing to surrender, gathered his last forces for a suicidal attack, Force lightning exploding from his hands in all directions without control or precision, just pure hatred manifested as destructive energy. But he was too weak, too wounded, and against 3 prepared Jedi his final attack was useless. The final blow came from Mace Windu, his purple saber piercing the heart of the dark side with absolute precision, ending the life of Darth Sidious, and with it the Sith threat that had hung over the galaxy. The Sith Lord's body fell on the floor of the office that had been the center of his empire of lies and manipulation, and with his death, the plans to destroy the Jedi and establish a galactic empire died along with him. The Republic was saved that day, not through great battles or complex military strategies, but because at the crucial moment, Anakin Skywalker chose to believe in evidence instead of fear, in his true friends instead of a skilled manipulator. And all of this happened because Ahsoka Tano, the Padawan the Council had assigned to Anakin years before, trusted her instincts, investigated the impossible, and refused to abandon the one she always called master even when he was lost in darkness.